of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm here today with Corey Thompson, who's the Dice Tower news editor and also the host of the weekly news podcast, Dice Tower Now. How's it going today, Corey?
Oh, doing great. I am so excited to be here. Thanks so much for putting me on. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I love talking to you. Ever since I originally met you, I think at the Gamma trade show in 2020, just before the pandemic, you had just such a positive, happy energy. And every convention I've been to that you're there, I love talking games with you. I love playing games with you, whooping you in games occasionally.
Every time. I totally remember that Gamma. You were in line for breakfast coffee, and I think I bought you an ice cream.
Yeah, there was either one of us had ice cream. I don't recall exactly, but yeah, we were talking in line. That was super cool.
That was awesome.
And I know, Corey, you also have a blog where you kind of interview game designers over meals. How is that all going?
Oh, it's really fun. It's a lot of work. But for about 3 years now, I've been getting together with board game designers and going out to a meal and just recording the whole conversation. And sometimes we talk about games, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just chit-chat. I'm up to about 30 designers now. It's Dice Tower Dish is the name of the blog.
Cool. Yeah, I subscribe to it, and I love getting those email notifications when you have new interviews posted up. What was the last one that you did?
Behind.
What was the last one that you did?
Right now, I'm in the middle of doing breakfast with Luke Laurie, who's a designer of Andromeda's Edge, Manhattan, Energy Empire, Dwellings of Eldervale. And also Peter Vaughn, who was the producer behind Dwellings of Eldervale and now is the owner of Cardboard Alchemy, who did Flamecraft and all that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Before that, did Daryl Andrews. That was really fun. We went out to a seafood restaurant in the middle of nowhere during the gathering of friends.
That's cool. And then you did Eric Lang also, right? You interviewed Eric?
Yes. During Gamma, we went out to a seafood place. That was really fun. We talked about you can only imagine. We talked about everything. It was really cool.
That's cool. A lot of seafood meals, it sounds like.
Well, I eat what I like.
I was going to say, do you pick the restaurant or food, or does the designer?
It's funny. Sometimes the designers want to go somewhere really simple and easy. I've had a couple requests for like fast food, In-N-Out Burger. But sometimes we go somewhere super fancy. I remember Rob Davio and I went to like a 4-star restaurant and got really gourmet food.
That's awesome. Well, today we're going to be getting into a little top 5 action and discussing our favorite deck building games. And I think, I don't know what games are on your list, but I was thinking with this list, it was going to be mostly pure deck builders or board games that have deck building, but like deck building is clearly kind of in the forefront of the mechanisms of the game.
You made it tough for me. There's a lot of games now that use deck building just a little bit to kind of drive the action. And I thought about cheating a couple times there, but you told me strict, pure deck builders. So I tried really hard to stick to that.
I tried too. And yeah, deck building is one of my favorite mechanisms. And I really love how there are so many games that are just kind of even sprinkling it in because I love it.
Oh, it's so cool. I think this is the age of the hybrid board game. Everybody is mixing together mechanisms that used to live separate. Deck building with area control or worker placement with cards. It's every hot game is a mix of everything else.
Yeah, totally. But before we start talking about deck building games, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Corey. So let's jump into fresh plays. So, Corey, what have you been playing lately?
So mostly I've been picking up those games that I got at Essenspiel back in October. Oh, I've got a pile left to be played. The first big
Nice.
one that really hit me was Atiwa. Atiwa is the new one from
Ooh.
Uwe Rosenberg, the designer behind Agricola, Hallertau, Caverna, all those famous ones. It's published by Lookout Games, plays 1 to 4 players in about 30 to 120 minutes. Um,
Okay.
it's one of Uwe Rosenberg's lighter titles, I feel. This isn't like a super heavy Ora Labora kind of thing.
Mm.
As a little bit of history, I did an interview with Uwe. We ate a meal together back in Essen
Seafood?
2019. Actually, I think we had currywurst. It was very traditional.
Oh.
But he said in that he was working on a trilogy of games that took place in the country of Ghana that were dealing with their specific political and ecological crises. And he was excited to say about heavy Euro games taking place in this environment. So I can only imagine Atiwa is probably the first one from this trilogy that he was talking about. So the mayor of Kibi, a city in Ghana, which is right along the Ottawa mountain range, recently instituted a program to welcome and encourage fruit bats because fruit bats will fly away every night up to 60 kilometers away. They go where the fruit is,
Wow.
and then they pig out on all the fruit and they fly back home to wherever they're roosting. The trick here is they poop a lot while they're flying.
Oh,
so these guys actually repopulate rainforests much more effectively than almost any other method that's been used.
Oh, wow.
So the mayor of Kibi has trained his citizens to encourage and love the fruit bats and set up houses and make it all comfortable for them so that they constantly fly away, reforest, and come back.
Cool.
So in the game, players collect these square terrain cards that have a 3x3 grid of spaces. Every square on a card is designated for a single type of resource. Now, on your player board, you have a closed economy of resources. There's actually 5 lines of tokens covering up spaces on your player board. When you gain a resource, you move it from one of these lines onto one of your terrain cards. And then when you spend it, you move it back from the terrain card onto your storage area, one of those 5 lines.
Gotcha.
And every one of those lines, when it's uncovered, creates an income, and they all feed into each other in a chain. So there's wild animals, which create more trees. There's trees that create more fruit. And there's fruit that attract more bats.
Ah.
So the game is this closed economy where you're managing your resources and trying to make everything feed into everything else. It's a really cool, very mathematically perfect engine builder.
That's awesome.
I had such a good time of it. The game itself is worker placement, and the worker placement board is pretty cool. A lot of different options to do. But it's not about getting more workers. It's about effectively making your engine run by manipulating the resources, getting new cards. And one of the big things in it is to train your villagers so that they love the fruit bats and they're more ecologically conscious about things like gold mining. And there's a whole pollution engine that can destroy your terrain tiles if you don't do the gold mining right. So an absolute masterpiece of cause and effect. This is Atiwa by Uwe Rosenberg, recently released from Lookout Games.
Wow, that sounds awesome. And I love the whole real life and historic kind of like tie in to the theme, because I did not know any of that. But I've seen the game on the table at a game night I was at a couple weeks ago, and it looks so interesting. But I was, this wasn't something that I picked up at Essen because I'm not always a huge Uwe Rosenberg fan. Like, I really like
Sure.
Le Havre I liked Newsfjord. I thought that was kind of a relaxing
And I'd
game.
compare this more with his lighter, newer resource management games like Hallertau or Newsfjord or
Okay.
Raycolt. One of the lighter fares.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I definitely want to check this out because I keep hearing good things about it, and I love those little bat meeples. I think the bat meeples are completely adorable.
They're
So,
awesome.
well, something I've been playing recently is a little two-player game you might have played called Beer and Bread. This is another 2022 release. It's designed by Scott Alms, who also designed like a lot of the Tiny Epic games. I don't know if he did all of them or not. And also Warp's Edge, which is a cool like bag building solo game, and then Claim, which is a two-player trick taking game. That's pretty cool. But it was originally published by Deep Print Games, which is, I believe, a German company. And Capstone Games is publishing it in the US. So I got my copy from Capstone. But it's basically a multi use card game for two players where we are two villages that share fields and resources, and we're competing to earn the most money from producing beer and bread, as its title implies. And you play the game over 6 years, where you alternate between fruitful and dry years. Each year starts with a seeding phase where you'll populate the fields on the board. It has this like really tiny, cute game board with awesome art. I love the layout of it. This is just really a great looking game to begin with really nice components. But each year you're going to start with a seeding phase where you're going to populate the fields with a certain amount of resources. And there's wheat, barley, rye, and we call rye in my house Bart Simpsons because it looks like little Bart Simpson heads.
I thought
And
that
then
was the wheat was the Bart Simpson heads.
no, it's the orange one, the rye.
We do it too.
Oh, cool. All right, so there's Bart Simpsons, and then there's hops and water. And whenever, regardless if it's a fruitful year or a dry year, you're always going to put out all of the water tokens. But if it's a fruitful year, you might put out something like 7 wheat. And then if it's a dry year, you might only be putting out, I forget, like four wheat or something like that. So you get less resources that you'll be able to pull from. So that's one of the differences between fruitful versus dry years. And then next you have a card phase where you're going to draw 5 cards. In some rounds, you're going to draw up to 5 cards, but you'll have a hand of 5 cards, and they're multi-use cards. So when you go to the action phase and you start taking actions, there are only 3 different actions you can take. And the multi-use cards are divided into 3 sections. The art on them, the graphic design is just great. But your first action you could do is harvest and store resources. So you would just kind of play a card sort of into a tableau, and you look at the top part of the card, and it might say gain a hops, gain a water token, and gain a Bart Simpson. And then you would put them into a storage area. So each player starts with like a storage area of 9 spaces. But you can, spoiler alert, make some upgrades and increase your storage. So harvesting and storing resources is one action. Then once you have resources, you're going to want to produce beer and bread because that's the name of the game. So you're going to spend resources to produce beer and bread. And again, you're going to always be playing a card on your turn. And the middle section of the card is what you need to spend to either produce beer or bread. And I should mention there are 2 different types of cards. The beer cards have a blue back. The bread cards have like a tan kind of bread colored back. So you might have a hand of some beer cards, some bread cards, some combination of the 2. But if you have a beer card, you're going to have resources needed to produce beer. And when you produce the beer, you spend the resources from your storage, and then you just flip the card over, and you have 2 slots on your side of the game board that you can hold beer and bread cards. Then the last action you could choose is upgrade and clean your facilities. So The only way to kind of free up that card slot where you just produce that beer or bread is to take this action, which first of all lets you use a card, because you're always using a card when it's your turn to take an action. And you can upgrade some area of your kind of facility. You can play an upgrade that'll apply to the seeding phase, or when you're harvesting resources. Like maybe once you get one barley, also take another barley, collect another barley. Or during the seeding phase, you always take a wheat or something like that. Or there are also upgrades that can impact your end game scoring. There are upgrades that'll allow you to increase your storage, as I kind of mentioned earlier. So you can take a card, tuck it in the appropriate slot under the game board, and you're upgrading your ability to do something, which is really cool because you can kind of stack these things too. And then after you do your upgrade, you can clean the cards from the beer and or bread that you made, and you just kind of like stash those cards off to the side. So in the fruitful years, you play a card from your hand, your opponent plays a card from their hand, and then you swap hands. So it's like a drafting kind of round. And then you play a card, swap hands again. But in the dry years, when you have your hand of 5 cards, you don't swap at all. But instead, there are these 3 exchange cards that are out, which are really cool, because you can, on your turn, either play one of your cards from your hand and take an action, or you can put one of your cards from your hand and swap it with one of the exchange cards, and then use that card to take an action. But anyway, at the end of the game, you're going to score up all the bread you produced and then all the beer you produced, because they all have a coin value on them. You might, depending on how you upgraded your whole facilities, you might have some bonus money you might make for beer and or bread. And you're going to total the amount of money that you made from beer, and then total the amount that you made from bread. And whichever is lower, that is your score for the game. So you really have to balance making both, so you're not stuck with like, hey, I made $50 from beer, but only 10 from bread. Well, guess what? Your score is 10 if that's the case. So I really, really, really like this game. Like, I think there's so many cool choices with the multi-use cards and the upgrade abilities you can do, and, you know, deciding when you want to harvest. Because I didn't mention this, but when you take a harvest action, you're gaining resources. And if you take another harvest action within the same year, you stack those cards and you gain resources from all the cards you harvested. And if you ever are collecting resources and have more than you can store, you have to offer them to your opponent. So there's a whole timing element of, you know, trying not to give your opponent stuff, but sometimes you have to. But anyway, I think it's a great game, beautiful art. It plays in about 30 to 45 minutes. It's in one of those small boxes like Seven Wonders Duel and Watergate and Targi, so it doesn't take up that much space. And it kind of like reminded me a little bit of Tiber the Builder with the multi-use cards and the drafting element of it. But Corey, I think you mentioned to me you played this before, right?
Oh, I picked it up at Essen and absolutely love it. Deep Print Games is a neat company. It's kind of the best of the band. It's formed by Peter Eggert from Eggert Spiel. It's got people from Pegasus Spiel, people from Plan B, people from Frosted Games. It's all the greatest.
All the
and
bangers.
The art, I'm with you. The art and graphic design, it's Michael Menzel, who, by the way, is the designer behind Legends of Andor. So he knows how a game flows.
Yes, that makes sense.
And he's part of the team on Deep Print. So it's a fantastic game. It's so much fun with it.
Yeah, and I've only played a couple times, but so I'm still kind of getting used to the cards, but I didn't even know that each beer card, like there are different types of beer, and one of the cards you can upgrade to help your end game scoring is like collect all the different types of beer. And the same with the bread. There are different, but the art is just, I don't know. I think it's just like so well done, so intuitive. I like that you could play it fast. I like that there are like really awesome decisions with the multi-use cards. So
absolutely. The other part I found fascinating is each round you really can only make one beer, one bread before you have to clear it out to make room for the next. So there's a lot of planning.
Yeah. Well, unless you upgrade and you play the upgrade that lets you hold more than one beer card in your slot. But yeah, it's a fantastic 2-player game. Again, that is Beer and Bread, a 2022 release from Deep Print Games and Capstone.
Very cool. All right, the next one was kind of a sleeper hit for me. This is Reflecto. It's designed by Roberto Fraga, who's the designer behind Captain Sonar and Dr. Eureka.
Okay.
He's kind of known for strange, physically quirky, weird mechanism games. And this was published by Mandu Games. It plays 2 players in about 20 minutes. So Reflecto, you're going to have to make some nice mental images here.
Okay.
Think back to the classic game Stratego.
Got it.
Where you have a bunch of pieces that are vertical, they look like doors, but you can see what's on the back of your own pieces, but you cannot see what's on the back of your opponent's pieces. You have 7 of these pieces, and they start at the back row of a 7x7 square checkerboard grid. 5 of them are dry erase, and you have written the letters from a 5-letter word on the back of these 5 pieces.
Okay.
2 of the pieces have mirrors on them.
Ooh.
So during the game, you move your pieces. Every turn you get to move one of your pieces 1 square in any direction. Forward, back, diagonal, doesn't matter. Any direction. You can jump your opponent's pieces, and this is checkers style. So you can actually chain a bunch of jumps together if all the pieces line up right. You can just go boop, 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 boop.
Okay.
That's really good for podcasts. My finger was moving with all the boops, so it's, like I said, mental images here. So you don't actually capture your opponent's pieces. The jumping, all the boop, 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 is to move farther. Because there's 2 ways to win at Reflecto. First, if you get all of your letter pieces off the end of your opponent's side of the board, in order from 1st letter to 5th letter, you win.
Okay.
Second, if you can guess your opponent's word, you win. Remember those mirror pieces? You have a 5-letter word, and there's 5 letters on 5 of your pieces, but you also have 2 pieces with mirrors. Mm-hmm. If you can maneuver your mirror in front of an opponent's piece, you can see what the letter is on it in the reflection.
Oh, cool.
But your opponent doesn't know which of your pieces are letters and which of your pieces are mirrors. So you're manipulating and moving all over the board. Such a neat abstract take on a word game.
Wow.
Quirky, bizarre. And again, this is they have, so you can guess their word. It blew me away. It was such a neat abstract take on a word game.
Wow.
Quirky, bizarre. And again, this is Reflecto by Roberto Fraga and published by Mandu Games. About 20 minutes, 2 players only, and it released at Essen 2022, so it might still be a little hard to find, but man, it was fun. It was really weird.
Wow, that sounds really, really neat. And actually, I remember Stratego was one of my favorite games growing up, actually. So anything that has that kind of mystery element of not knowing what's on your opponent's pieces is kind of cool, but this sounds like a really, really unique word game.
And the components are so well done. They're big, chunky plastic doors in 2-player colors, and there's actually tiny little dry erase boards that slip into the plastic pieces, or a mirror, an actual real mirror that slips into the plastic pieces.
Wow. Cool. Okay. I'm regretting not picking this up when I was at Essen.
Nobody was talking about it. But,
well, good. Now it is officially on my radar.
That's my goal. There's my job is done.
And another game I have played recently. I've only played it once so far, but I wanted to share it. It is a game called a brand new game in Q4 2022 called Charioteer. And it's designed by Matt Calkins, who was the designer of Sekigahara, the unification of Japan. I don't know if you ever played that, Corey.
No. You're getting obscure on me.
Okay, it's really good. It's a block war game, but it's, you know, anybody who's not even a war gamer would be like into it because it's you play these cards and it's got this cool bluffing element. Anyways, this is the same designer as Sekigahara, and it's published by GMT Games, and you can play it with 2 to 6 players. And in Charioteer, we are charioteers in the Circus Maximus, which is, you know, an ancient Roman chariot racing stadium. And it's a racing game where you're playing cards to move your chariot forward, which I know a lot of racing games, you play cards and you know, move your car forward or your bikes in, you know, Flamme Rouge. But this one just kind of, the way you play your cards is very interesting. And I feel like the game overall felt unique. In addition to, I like the theme. I think the theme is cool that we're chariots racing. But you have this, there's a big deck of cards, and each card, well, most of the cards in the deck have 3 symbols on them. And some of them might have some special icons that'll give you a special ability. But a symbol in this game is one of 4 colors with a number. So the 4 colors are representing the different types of movement you can make. So green means you're making a sprint movement. Attack means you're making red means you're making an attack movement. Yellow is a recovery movement, and black is a cornering movement. So like when you're moving around the corner of the board, you'll be able to move more efficiently when you play black cards and do a cornering movement. So you have these different colors, and in each of the colors, there are a couple different numbers you might see. Sprint doesn't really have any special effects because it's just like helping you move very far. So you might see a green 6 as one of the symbols. So what you're doing when you're trying to move your chariot is you are playing 1 to 3 cards from your hand, and we're all doing this simultaneously. We're picking cards from our hand and playing them face down. And the idea is you have to match the symbols on the card. So I might play a card that has 1 green 6, and then another card that has 2 green 6s, and another card that has 2 green 6s. So that movement, I would be saying, you know, when I reveal my cards, I'm doing a sprint movement, and I'm using a 6 symbol. And I'll also mention that these colors, each type of movement has a different shape. So if you are colorblind, you can differentiate between the different types of movement as well. But besides the cards from your hand, there's also a crowd card that's active, which is in the center of the game board. And any of us, any player, can also use that crowd card if one of the symbols on the crowd card matches the symbols that we're playing from cards in our hand. And you also, in this crowd card area, there are 3 cards. So there's the current crowd card, and then you can see what's coming because you'll have a hand of 8 cards. So there's a lot of hand management to this about thinking about like, oh, I see that crowd card's coming and I want to like leverage that with these cards. So maybe I don't want to use those, but I want to use these. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But the way you kind of tally up your movement to see how far you move is you count the number of symbols you have. So in my example, let's say I had 6, or let's say I have 5 6s, 5 green 6s, okay? So I have 5 symbols that match, and then the value of the symbols I'm using is 6. So I add 5 and 6, so my base movement is 11. Then everybody starts with these 5 tokens, which are kind of like booster tokens, or there's one that helps you like discard cards to kind of get some better options. But you can always play a token with your cards. So maybe I played my +5 green, so I would get +5 on that. And then we'll talk about how the attacks work in a second, but then you would subtract any damage you have. And then you also have skill markers for each of the 4 types of movement, which you can advance during the game. So that might increase your score. So anyway, let's say I ended up with a score of 15. I would move my chariot forward 15 spaces. Anytime you pass an opponent, you have to add +1 to your movement for each opponent you're passing to get past them. So that's kind of cool. And then again, when you're going around the corners of the board, there are these outer spaces where if you don't play a black movement, which is a cornering movement, you have to hit all these outer spaces, which is going to take you longer to get around the corner. So you're trying to also time like, oh, I'm about to approach a corner. Maybe I want to do black cards, but there are reasons you might not want to do that, you know? So anyway, after you play your cards, you're going to move every person is going to move their chariots in order, starting with the chariot that's furthest ahead. And then you get rewards after you move. So you're always going to increase the skill that matches your movement. So in my example, if I played a sprint move, I'm going to increase my green skill token for that. And eventually, you know, it might push into this box where now all my greens are going to be +1. And then when you push the skill markers far enough, they have these bonus movements, which start at +3 and go to +9, which is cool. So there's a whole thing where you're trying to like increase your skill in these different areas too. And then there's an Emperor's die, which gets rolled every round. And it's like, what is the Emperor kind of rewarding? Or the Emperor sometimes punishes us, but so if the Emperor's die happen to be green on this turn, I would get to bump my green skill marker up twice. You know, one because I made a green movement, and one because that's what the Emperor wanted this round. So you're also, when you're playing your cards, you're looking at that Emperor die and thinking like, I could get a double bump on that skill if I play green right now, you know? But then you're also like, oh, do I want to use the crowd card? And the other reward you can get, which is key here, is there are fan tokens, which are little wooden blocks that have all sorts of sweet bonuses from like either wilds, or you could have a whip that if you're not in the lead, you could use a whip to kind of catch up. There's all sorts of cool things, but the only way you can get a fan token is if you have at least 6 matching symbols. So again, if you're using the crowd card that's out there, that public crowd card that we can all use, you could play 3 cards and use that and maybe have more than 6 matching symbols. Because the more matching symbols you have, the further you're going to move. So anyway, it's super cool. You play 3 laps, and then whenever someone crosses over the finish line after the 3rd lap, that triggers the end of the game. Then you just finish out the round and see who got the furthest. But I don't know. I think it's a super cool game. Like the decisions from the way the card play works and the hand management in this game, and you're trying to like maximize your symbols so you can get those fan tokens because they're very, very helpful. Oh, and let me also tell you how the attack works. I kind of just showed you sprinting as you just move around. But when you play an attack move, you are basically attacking other players. And if you use at least 3 cards, whether it's the crowd card with 2 of your cards, or if you use 3 cards, everybody's going to take 1 damage unless they had a shield to protect them. So you're going to take a damage cube. If you happen to play 4 cards, meaning you played 3 and you use the crowd card, then everybody's going to take 2 damage cubes. And thematically, the attack means, because you don't need to be like right next to them to attack, but it's like you're inciting the crowd, and you're getting the crowd to throw stuff at the other charioteers and everything. So, you know, so the attack is a way to kind of, because when you accumulate damage cubes, it's going to like reduce your movement. So that's something you have to manage in this game. But then you could take a recovery turn, which is the yellow icon. And when you take a recovery, you're going to reduce half the amount of damage you have in your damage box. And it's just like another move. And then, like I said, the cornering move type lets you move around corners more efficiently. But it was just kind of a neck and neck race. You know, there are different moments where certain people would be ahead, certain people behind, people are catching up, but it's very, very strategic. And I really like the card play on this one. I'm assuming you've never played it or probably heard of it yet.
I have not, no. There's a bunch of these Circus Maximus games, and this sounds really cool. I like the idea. It sounds like you can get 15, 20 movement. It just sounds so over the top. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is awesome. You know, the sprints allow you to kind of like boost your movement a lot, But like again, when you're going around the corners, if you're not playing a cornering move, it'll slow you down. So even like having something like 10 movement doesn't seem like that much as you're going around the corner inefficiently. But anyway, this is definitely like a cool game to check out if you like racing games. It's called Charioteer, and it's from GMT Games. Just came out. I think it's out.
That sounds awesome.
Yep. So that was Charioteer. But I guess we should probably start talking about some deck building games, Corey.
Oh, I wasn't ready for deck building games. All right.
So deck building, I mentioned it's one of my favorite mechanisms. And for any listeners out there who aren't familiar with deck building, basically everybody starts the game with an identical deck of cards, and they're usually weak cards. And then throughout the game, you can buy or acquire different cards for your deck and better cards that typically go into your discard pile, so that as you play through the cards in your hand, your deck will eventually run out, and then you'll shuffle your discard pile. And now it includes those new cards you got, and your form, your deck is just gradually getting more powerful and often like kind of unique from other players. And you're just kind of like, I don't know, I feel like having fun making these different card combos and, building your deck in your own way. Dominion, I think for me, was my first deck building game. I'm pretty sure Dominion was my first deck building game that I've ever played. And to me, it feels like, one of the kind of like granddaddies of deck building.
Oh, without a doubt.
But you've been in the hobby a lot longer than me. So like, what would you say are some other games like Dominion that kind of like kick this off?
You're putting me on the spot. So there's a little bit of controversy in the industry as to what the first deck building game was. And there's a bunch of people who put that name on, believe it or not, Starcraft, the board game based on the video game. It was done in 2007 by Corey Knizia and Fantasy Flight Games. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind that the most influential deck builder, the first most influential deck builder, is Dominion. It's done by Rio Grande Games. The designer is Donald X. Vaccarino. I actually got to do one of my mealtime interviews with Donald X about Dominion, and he had interesting stories about how he wanted to create a fantasy battling game where you put together a party of heroes and give them weapons and give them abilities, but he couldn't figure out how to level them up. So he created this deck building mechanism where you'd replace cards or put in better cards with better items and better levels and all this. And he never actually released that, but he distilled down that concept of building up your own personal deck and created Dominion in 2008.
Cool.
Some other big ones that came up that really put deck building back in the public eye: Thunderstone by Mike Elliott and publisher AEG really was that fantasy, build a party, level up your guys deck builder, fight monsters. And there's been a lot of versions of that over the years. One of the first ones that I was really aware of was Legendary. Came out in 2012 by Upper Deck, which they're not usually known as a board game company, but they've really used this Legendary IP to make a ton of pure deck building games.
Oh, yeah.
The first one was the Marvel Legendary, and I was drawn to it from the Marvel heroes. And you basically get a bunch of heroes and a bunch of special events and cards and fight off bad guys. And it was fun. That was in 2012. And then Star Realms, of course, really defined the 2-player head-to-head, I'm fighting you with my special cards. That was in 2014 from Wise Wizard.
Right. Oh, wow. I've never played Thunderstone before. But and StarCraft was the game that was re-implemented as Forbidden Stars.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I've never played StarCraft, but I do like Forbidden Stars, and I like what the deck building, does in that game, or how it works in that game.
Yeah, the combat section of the board game was about buying and integrating new cards into this deck of combat cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but like I just find deck building to be so satisfying, the way you're kind of engine building and customizing your deck. And personally, like I just like playing cards. Like I like holding cards. I like the tactile experience of playing card games. I love LCGs. So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. So deck
When you
building,
have just thousands and thousands of cards,
yeah.
there's just something really satisfying about that.
Yeah, I really enjoy them. What do you think would be something like people wouldn't like about deck building games, or what do you least like about them?
Yeah. One of the really interesting things about deck builders is they're very, very non-intuitive. We don't think about it too much anymore because we've been in the industry for a while. But if you get a chance at some point, read the instructions to the original Dominion. Because they use a lot of words to explain what deck building is, because it just does not sit. It is not intuitive with the general public. Now, that aside, because we all know how it works now, deck building can have a slow start. You do start with terrible, terrible cards. So the first couple turns turn kind of rote. They're usually the same thing. And there's a lot of randomness involved. What cards are available to buy is very random. What cards show up in your hand is very random. So it's the combo of this slow start and random start that sometimes turns people off. I have a friend who was for a very long time a professional Magic the Gathering judge.
Oh, okay.
And he told me that he does not like deck building games because it's all of the boring parts of Magic the Gathering and then you never actually get to play.
Yeah, it could be a slow build up, but but I enjoyed the build up. Anyway,
I do too.
Anyway, let's jump into our top 5. I think you maybe mentioned you have a couple honorable mentions. And if not, I do. Do you have any?
That neither of us could be limited by just 5.
I know. I had to kind of give a shout out to 3 games really quickly.
Go for it.
One, I'm just blasting through these. One is Fort. I think Fort has just such an amazing theme, and I love the player interaction. I also own SPQF.
Yes, the original version.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great little game, but it didn't make my top 5.
Oh, and I love Kyle Fair's art.
Oh,
my
yeah.
God. It just speaks to me. It's so excited and childlike and innocent, and it all works together in Fort.
I also want to give a quick shout out to Mystic Vale. I think that's John DeClaire. The card crafting in that game mixed with the push your luck is just like so cool. So cool. I really love Mystic Vale. And then
it's such an interesting way of doing the deck building. And actually Mystic Vale, Claire said that it was a proof of concept. He actually wanted to use that mechanism for other games, for Edge of Darkness. But the publisher didn't think it would fly. So he did Mystic Vale just to prove that this card crafting thing could, well, 1, be printed, because that hadn't been done before.
Oh, yeah.
And 2, that the public would actually like it.
Yep.
And it turned super popular. It's very cool.
Totally. And then the last honorable mention is just Dune Imperium. I love Dune Imperium.
Yes.
But I just feel like it's not deck buildy enough for this list, because it's
one of our classic hybrid games.
Yeah, and it's super hybrid, where I think you don't have to go that hard with deck building in that game to like still make it work well. So I don't know, I just didn't feel like that was a that's just more of a deck building worker placement game, not just a straight up deck building game. So
But I love these games that are using deck building as a driving mechanism for something else.
Me
Like,
too.
my
Me
notable
too.
mention is Tyrants of the Underdark from Gale Force 9. It is a deck building game, but the attack action, because most deck building games, the cards either are money to buy new cards or power to attack something. And in Tyrants of the Underdark, that attack action is area control on a board. You're attacking spaces on the board and other players' spaces, taking them over.
I have been wanting to play that forever. I just bought it when they reprinted it.
It's so good and so underrated, yeah.
And I love area control, and I love, area control and deck building. I know I'm going to love it. I just haven't gotten it to the table yet, and this is just a gentle poke telling me I need to play that one. So,
and
Corey.
Then,
oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes. I had a honorable mention. Now, you brought up Dune Imperium, and there's been this head-to-head battle ever since they released of Dune Imperium versus Arnak.
Right.
And I'm going to have to throw Ruins of Arnak in there. The deck building is simple and elegant. New cards go right on top. You don't reshuffle your cards when they build up. It's very predictable what's going to happen. But again, it's part of a larger game that does a lot of other things. So that's another honorable mention for me is Lost Ruins of Arnak from CGE.
Yep, and I really like the way they did the card market in that game, where you have access to less of the one type of card. I've only played it like once, I think. Yeah, but I thought that was interesting the way the card market kind of changes the types of cards that are out there as the game progresses.
Yes, absolutely.
But in a head-to-head battle, it's Dune Imperium for me. It's Dune Imperium for me, but
the eyepiece certainly works for me.
Cool. Any more honorable mentions?
I think I'll leave it my 2 and your 2. I think that sounds good. Or cool. Did you do 3? Do I have to one up you here?
I sort of did 3.
All right. I'm going to say Clank. Wonderful deck building, neat little overall theme, move down the board, move back, do it first. So Clank from Direwolf and Paul Denon.
Yes.
So, there you go. I did 3.
Yeah. and Clank, I love Clank and all the different versions of Clank Legacy. I haven't played Catacombs yet, but
so good.
I think that's going to be amazing. But Clank I would put on my list more than I would like Dune Imperium. Because I feel like it's more deck buildy, even though it does have the board game component to it. But
I get that.
So it's not on my list, but I do love it a lot. But I didn't not put it on my list just because of the board game part. Just didn't make the cut.
And see, I felt that the overall theme of it, that you had the goal of the game is to move into the dungeon, grab something, and move away, and that dissociated it from the deck building for me, which is a positive thing. This is not a deck building game.
Right.
It's using deck building to do a push your luck explore.
You're right.
So that's why I didn't put it on.
Fair
my list,
enough.
But I love it.
Cool. All right. So Corey, what is your number 5?
Oh, these are in no particular order, but
sure.
No particular order. But this is the 5th one. So I'm going to pick the Solo Deck Builder Friday from Freedom and Freeze and 2F Spiel.
Nice.
So in Friday, you are the indigenous friend and helper, Friday, who is trying to help a completely helpless Robinson Crusoe survive on the island. The game is about revealing hazard cards and then choosing to either fight them or get rid of them. But if you fight them, they turn into good cards that then end up in your deck. So you're building up a more and more powerful deck. There's also a great little Band-Aid where you can use your own health to help fight these cards so that you can integrate them into your deck. And there's wonderful, terrible cards that you start with that are your aging cards. I mean, where else can you get a deck builder where one of your starting cards is just called Very Stupid? I'm going to play this. I'm just very stupid.
Great.
So
great.
The game adds more and more terrible cards as you cycle through your own personal deck over and over. And that hazard deck that you're going through to gain new cards, you only get to go through that 3 times. Then you have to fight a final battle and see if you won. So that's Friday by Freedom and Freeze and 2F Spiel. And that's my number 5 pick.
Awesome pick. Awesome pick. My number 5 is Dale of Merchants, which was originally released in 2015, designed by Sammy Laxo, published by Snowdale Design. So Mandy Hutchinson introduced this game to me earlier this year, and I had heard about Dale of Merchants. It plays with 2 to 4 players, but it wasn't until I sat down and played it that I quite enjoyed it. So each game you play with a few different types of animal decks, and all of the different animals you can play with have kind of different play styles, and they specialize in different things. So I think there's Dale Merchants 1, there's Dale Merchants 2, 3, and then the one I have is the collections, but I actually then bought them all so I could fill the collections box. So I have every single animal type the game has to offer, and I just love kind of mixing and matching different animals to kind of create this game that feels very different each time. But on your turn, you can either buy cards from the market, you can play a technique, or you can stall to basically, it's a kind of a set collection thing, which is advancing you towards your end game objective, which is the first person at the end of the game, the first person to have their 8th stall filled by the end of the game wins. So it is a racing game, and whenever you're filling a stall, you're basically culling your deck, and you're making sets of the same type of animal where the value on the cards increase by 1. So your first stall, you just need any animal that has a value of 1, exactly 1. Next stall, you need a value of exactly 2 with the same animals. It could be 2 1 cards, or it could be 1 single card that has a 2 on it for an animal. Then you have to do your 3 stall, your 4 stall, your 5 stall, So there's this whole balance of your deck building, but then when is the timing for when I should start stalling cards? And the minute one person stalls a card, then other people are like, oh shoot, I better stall or I'm going to fall behind. But it's a very light game. Again, I like the way the different animal decks kind of change up the play. I also really like that it's a racing game, because a lot of deck building games is see who has the most victory points at the end of the game, which is fine. But this is no, we don't care about any victory points. We're seeing who can effectively kind of manage their deck to be able to get their 8th stall filled first. So I think it's super cool. And I like that it's light, so I can play it with my lighter game friends. I can even introduce it to non-gamer friends. It plays quickly. It's definitely, again, accessible with the animal art and everything. The art's really cute on these cards. So that is my number 5 that I just played for the first time this year, and I've played several times. That is Dale of Merchants.
I agree 100%. And that amazing art, by the way, is also the designer, Sam Lasko.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So he's one of those people.
That designs the game and does the art. That's super.
I will say that if I was prompted to make a list of deck building games, this probably would be on it. But I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay. So what's your number 4, Corey?
My number 4 is Xenon Profiteer by designer T.C. Petty III and published by Eagle Griffin.
Okay.
So, most people don't know this one. And I want to talk a little bit about what you brought up, which is culling of cards. deck builders originally, I mean, the goal of them was you start with terrible cards, you get better cards so that you play better cards. But a really big part of a lot of deck builders is the culling of the cards. If you can remove a lot of cards and a lot of terrible cards, you'll go through your really good cards faster because you'll go through your deck and bring it back up again.
Yep.
Xenon Profiteer is a deck builder all about culling cards. So Xenon is a noble gas, and it's got a lot of useful things for lamps and experiments and all sorts of stuff in the real world. And Xenon is present just in the air. So in Xenon Profiteer, you are a scientist looking to isolate Xenon from the air. One of the big actions you do is you collect air, which means you take a big pile of cards. There's oxygen cards and nitrogen cards and krypton cards and xenon cards. You take this big pile and you add it to your deck. And that's the only way you get more xenon, is you get it with all of these other elements in a big pile. Then you work your turns to get rid of the garbage. If you draw a hand of cards that's only xenon, you get to collect them and you use them for points. Now, there's also, you can build parts of your engine and build little buildings and experiments and special events, but the goal really is to add a whole ton of garbage, some of which is xenon, and then get rid of all the garbage so that you draw only the xenon. So this is Xenon Profiteer from T.C. Petty III and Eagle Griffin. And that's my number 4.
Corey, that's awesome, because as you said the title and then you said the designer, I was like, little bells started ringing in my head. I played this one time. Gil Hova introduced this game to me, and I thought it was so cool. I think I tried to get a copy, but maybe it's kind of hard to find. But yeah, it's very unique, very unique. I like that, like, kind of deck deconstruction to get to the Xenon. Like, that's a really good one.
Exactly. It's a very fun one, a very weird one.
Deep cut. All right,
thank you.
My number 4 is Imperium Classics / Legends / Horizons. But the Imperium games, which came out in 2021, designed by Nigel Buckle and David Turtzi and published by Osprey Games. And Imperium Classics or Legends, they are civilization deck building games. So I don't know of any other game that you could say is a civilization building game and a deck building game, but the civilization building is, or the deck building in this game is so unique. Basically, 1 to 4 players are competing as different asymmetric nations to develop their civilizations. So at the end of the game, you want to have the most points, but each nation's starting cards are completely different, which allows each nation to play completely differently. So you have, some factions might be more aggressive, or they might be focused on like building out different types of land and discovering lands. But you also have, so you have your own kind of set of cards, and they're like, I forget the name of the card, but there's one type of card that'll come into your deck as you cycle through your deck. You add one of them in, which is custom to your faction. But then there's a card market, which is common in most deck builders. So there's 2 different ways you can get new cards for your deck. One is acquiring, and then that's when you're choosing a card from the market. But some of the cards have an unrest card with it. So if you are doing, so if you're acquiring, you have to take the unrest card with the card that you're taking. But then there's another way you can get cards, which is called breaking through. And that means you don't take the unrest if there is one on, attached to the card. And you can also take a card directly from the top of a deck. So there are different decks that are all kind of, there's like they're uncivilized cards. There's civilized cards, which are a little harder to get and also to play, because your civilization has to become civilized before you can actually play those cards. But this is like just such a unique feeling game. and talk about hybrid of blending civilization building with deck building. Plus the classics, they're both standalone games, the ones that are out right now, Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends. They have, I think, like 7 different factions. They all function completely uniquely, and you can also kind of play them together. So I could play, the Romans from my Classics deck against the Egyptians from my Legends box if I have both the boxes. And then there are even 14 more civilizations coming in Imperium Horizons, which comes out next in 2023. And they're all fully compatible with each other, but they all just feel so different and interact with the other civilizations in a complete different way. So that is my number 4, Imperium Classics, Imperium Legends, all of the Imperium games.
I certainly have heard of these, and I've written news stories about them, and everybody says they're great, but I have not played any of them yet.
Oh, you got to get on that.
You are a bad influence.
No, you're
I'm
a bad influence.
To get these.
I'm already making a list of games, Reflecto and Xenon Profiteer, that I have to get because of you, sir.
Yeah, this is a terrible podcast. Can I change my mind? It's like no more podcasts with Candice. This is awful.
So what's your number 3?
Number 3 is a classic, Valley of the Kings by Tom Cleaver and AEG. Ooh. So Valley of the Kings is a more traditional deck builder. You use your cards to buy new, more powerful cards. Except the market is this cool pyramid of cards. You can only buy from the bottom layer of the pyramid. And when you buy a card, all the others kind of tumble down and fill in the gaps. So you might buy a card in order to make another card more available. Or you might not buy a card because then the other player can get access to that really cool one. Now, the big reason I love Valley of the Kings is it has that decision-making that you talked about a little bit in Dale of Merchants, that your cards give you really cool abilities, but they are no points whatsoever unless you kill them. You have to take your cards and bury them in your tomb. They are gone for the rest of the game, but that's the only way they give you points. And then you get interesting combos where the cards you've buried might go into a set collection to give more points. But this decision-making process of getting a really cool card and then agonizing over removing it from your deck for points because the abilities are so neat. So Valley of the Kings had 2 sequel games. It was Valley of the Kings Afterlife and then Valley of the Kings Last Rites. And they had new cards and interesting twists and neat little mechanisms. But then the whole thing was released in a big premium edition. And that's the one that I play with. So this is Valley of the Kings by Tom Cleaver and AEG.
Another great pick, but thankfully I already own it. I really like that game too. Yes, I don't have that premium set though. I don't have the premium version. I just have the standard basic game. But yeah, it is really cool. And I love that decision. Like I like how the card market is a pyramid. Number 1, that's unique. Because you're like, what am I opening up for my opponent to potentially grab? If I buy that card,
exactly.
Very
it's thematically, it's got neat art. It's just a fun game. I still pull it out.
Cool. All right. Well, my number 3 is Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game.
There you go.
There we go. There's the Legendary Encounters. So this is a 2014 release designed by Ben Chikosky and Daniel Mendel. And it's from Upper Deck Entertainment, as Corey mentioned a little bit earlier.
Maybe.
So first of all, I am not a big fanatic of the Alien movies. And I kind of resisted trying this game for a while because I was like, I don't really get into the Alien movies. I have seen them and I can say they're good. It's just not my thing really. But what I love about this is, number 1, it's fully cooperative. And I think the fact that it is based on the Alien movies, it adds this like really cool element of like suspense, and it's kind of, it's very tense as you play because you're basically teaming up and trying to survive against an onslaught of aliens. And I love the progression of how the aliens come into play. So there's the game comes with this playmat that has, its different sections. And then the top section, there is the complex. So every time on everybody's turn, a new card from the bad stuff deck, usually they're aliens or bad, some type of baddies or bad events, but they come into the complex face down. And I forget how many card slots there are, but as players take their turn, another card's coming, they're sliding. And eventually, if we don't do something about it, these aliens are going to come into the combat zone where they're going to start attacking us. And that's when they flip over. Now, there is an action that you can take to kind of, I forget, I think it's called scan or something, where you can scan by spending cards to scan, and you will flip something over. And I think you can attack it while it's in the complex before they pile up into the combat zone. But there's something I just really like about that suspense of these aliens and bad things that you don't know exactly what's going to happen. These cards are just sliding down, but meanwhile you're trying to also build up your deck to get better cards so you can recruit more allies and people that are going to help you kind of deal with all these aliens. And each game you have like a different location and objectives that you play, and you can play through the actual movies if you want. Like there's an alien movie. You can play through the Aliens, Alien 3, whatever that one's called. But yeah, there aren't a ton. Like Aeon's End is cooperative, but I don't know how many cooperative deck building games are, but I like the cooperative nature of this. You can kind of help other players out on their turn. And I just really, really love the suspense. And this one just kind of surprised me because I at first I was like, oh, I've heard good things about this game, but I'm not into aliens at all. But something, triggered me to buy a copy at some point, like a year or so ago, and bought it, played it, loved it. So yeah, so this one is kind of just a keeper for me when it comes to deck building games. And that is Legendary Counters, an alien deck building game. Have you played that one?
I have. I totally agree. Now, you probably know all this, but Legendary has two lines. There's the Legendary deck building game that started with Marvel, and that was their original one. And those are semi-cooperative. They're really competitive games.
Okay.
They're straightforward deck builders. But they also have the Legendary Encounters line, and they have a bunch of cooperative deck builders that use that same general system of baddies coming in face down.
Yeah.
And then you reveal them. And the Legendary Encounters, Aliens, and then they had the Predator add-ons, which that was so cool. But then there was Firefly. And I thought that was really good. The game got panned because honestly the art's pretty bad. But the gameplay follows the episodes of the original Firefly series and does them really well. Cool. And it's got interesting cooperative mechanisms where a card you play can be used as a resource by another player. You can add into their turn.
Oh, interesting.
They also have the Encounters game for 007.
Yep.
And just announced is The Matrix.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to get
Matrix
that
movies.
one. I'm very excited about that.
It's got that same art problem, but it could be really fun because I've enjoyed all the Encounters games. I agree. They're totally fun.
And from what I heard, The Matrix is going to mostly resemble kind of the gameplay of Alien. So
sure. They're all very similar.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure because usually a lot of people end up picking this one as their favorite. And I actually haven't played any of the other ones, so I can't even compare. I just know that like this one is a hit for me.
Oh, it's great. I agree. You have my approval.
Oh, thank you, Corey. Thank you. I was hoping, this whole episode I've been sitting here hoping for your approval.
I know.
All right. So,
that's why I felt I had to say it.
So what's your number 2?
My number 2 is a little game you may not have played. It's a little obscure. It's called Dale of Merchants by Sammy Lasco and
I've never heard of
Snowdale
this.
Design. I know. So you nailed it. Dale of Merchants is really that fun deck builder because one, it uses the culling mechanism like I've talked about too many times now. You really got to decide, do you want to keep that card for its ability or do you want to put it into a stall so that you can actually win, so you can race? It's got all the different kinds of animal folk. There's actually, right now, there's 27 different animal folk cards or decks that you can choose from.
So awesome.
If you have the promo Systematic Eurasian Beavers.
Ah.
And that's another big thing is these things are named great names. Come on. Systematic Eurasian Beavers. And just the variety of all these different animal folks. You've got like the vampire bats who work on a day-night cycle. So you need to keep track of time.
Yep.
Because the bats only do certain things at night and only do certain things in the day. Or the introduction of money, which could be this savable, variable resource. And I think it was the lizards that had the money. Or the chameleons, which have the copy cards, because they're chameleons and they can copy other abilities. So just so much variability on all the different kinds of animals.
Yeah, and I love the squirrels, too. The squirrels, they help you do cool stuff with your stalls. Like, I think they let you kind of mix and match. Instead of having the same type of animal in a stall, you have some flexibility there. And
they can use the junk cards, because squirrels are collectors of junk.
Yes.
It's so thematic and wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, you probably know this too, but Dale of Merchants is a sequel game. It's actually the sequel to Dawn of the Peacemakers.
No, I did not know that.
And Dawn of the Peacemakers was Sammy's first game. And it's a deeper, more adventure-y campaign style game. And that actually feeds forward because you know that Sammy Lasco, Snowdale Design, and all of these animal folk are in the new game, Legends of Galzyr.
Yeah.
And Galzyr has just delivered to backers from a really successful crowdfunding campaign. And it is a campaign adventure style game with these animal folk. So I love the world.
Yeah.
I love the deck building. Dale of Merchants by Sammy Lasco and Snowdale Design. It's a winner. And everybody I bring it out for, I think you said it too.
Yep.
Everybody I bring it out for loves it, and they ask to play it again and again. So great entry game, great continuing game. It's really an evergreen for me.
Yep, and I approve of that, Corey. I approve of your choice there.
Oh, good.
You have my approval.
I was getting ready to leave. This is if I didn't get your approval.
And I'll just also mention with Dale Merchants, it's a great one to bring out at the end of the night when you're just, after you play like a heavier game, you're like, oh, not quite ready to go home. Maybe you don't want to just play, basic cards or a party game or something. It just plays so quickly and it's lots of laughs.
It plays like a classic light card game. Those card games that your parents would pull out on a random day and you'd chat while playing it. It plays like that. It's so fun.
Good stuff. Okay, well, my number 2 is the Undaunted series. So Undaunted Normandy, Undaunted North Africa, Undaunted Stalingrad. And this could kind of be considered a hybrid. But I'm still putting it on the list because it's a deck building game and the deck building is very key in this game. But I'll say Undaunted Normandy was the first one to come out, and that came out in 2019. And these games are designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin, the same 2 designers who designed War Chest, which is also a banger. And I couldn't believe when I discovered that they were both behind both games. I was like, oh my goodness. I love when they partner up together. I'm really, really loving the results. And
Stalingrad actually just released. I think it's at the top of the BGG hotness this week.
Oh yeah, it is. It is hot. I have my copy. Thanks for Osprey for sending it to me. And I can't wait to dig into it and I like them all. So yes, and the publisher for the Undaunted series is Osprey Games. So if you're not familiar with Undaunted, it's, mainly a 2-player game where you're commanding soldiers across a series of scenario-based World War II missions on a modular game board. So you have these different tiles that you'll set up depending on the scenario, and you'll have some kind of objective. Maybe you need to take control of 3 objective points, or maybe you need to take down, unit XYZ. So each scenario kind of has a different setup and some different challenges. There's a lot of variety from the different scenarios and across the different boxes. So from Undaunted Normandy to Undaunted North Africa to Undaunted Stalingrad, from what I've seen, but I haven't played just yet. But you are building your deck with different types of military units. So when you have them in your hand, you can use them to take actions on the board with these different units. And each card has usually a variety of a couple, maybe 2 to 4 different actions you can choose. So I think you only have 4 cards in your hand. When you start the round, you always draw 4 cards, and then the next thing you do is you determine initiative. So you're secretly picking one of those cards to vie for initiative, and that is always a super hard decision, because not only will you not have that card for the upcoming turn, but you're also well, what is my opponent going to pick? Am I about to play this card that's a value 5? And what if my opponent puts a 6 and they still get the initiative? So there's all this crunching that goes on in your brain just when you're determining the initiative, and you kind of reveal your cards simultaneously and you see who gets to start. And this is a game where initiative can totally matter, having the upper hand on a turn to pull something off before your opponent. That could be super important sometimes. And other times you might not care. You might just say, I'm going to burn there are these Fog of War cards, which are deck cloggers, which we haven't really talked about. But in most deck building games, there's usually a card that's going to just be there to clog your deck. And I love that thematically in these World War II games, you have Fog of War cards that are kind of interfering with your plans. The other cool thing is you can play these games as a campaign, or you can just play through individual scenarios. And the deck building is quite tricky, because you kind of have to find a balance of having enough cards of a certain type of unit so that you're able to draw those cards and then activate that unit. But if you go too heavy with one type, then you might not be able to move. I have this machine gunner over here that I've been trying to move, but I can't draw a machine gunner card. So the deck building in this game is really interesting. And when you're deck building, similar to Aliens, you're recruiting people for your team, pretty much recruiting more cards of a certain military unit type. But everybody has their own, each player has their own set of cards, for their card market that they're able to pull cards from. But it's such a fantastic game. I love the historical element to it. Then you have Undaunted Normandy was the first one. Then you have Undaunted North Africa, which takes it to the North African theater of World War II and adds vehicles, and kind of adds a little more spice to it. Then they have the Reinforcements expansion, which adds a 4-player mode, so you can play 2v2, which is kind of it's fun. It's a little less tense, but a little more like beer and pretzels. But it's really fun, and it's cool to have the flexibility to play it that way. And then that Reinforcements expansion also comes with a solo mode as well. And then again, Essen 2022 release, Stalingrad, which is another standalone campaign. And this one is even crazier, because they're branching narratives, and you can kind of level up your different types of soldiers. And there's unique artwork for as you level up, I have this, I have this captain, and in the beginning of the game, I'm playing this card a lot. Or let me give a better example. I have this machine gunner, and at the beginning of the game, my machine gunner looks like this, but the more I use that machine gunner, the more he'll age, and, the card stats kind of change gradually, or if there's injuries, there's all sorts of cool things. Also with Stalingrad, the actual tiles, instead of making it where if you blow up a building in your campaign where you like put a sticker on it or you tear up the tile or something, you flip it. There's a different tile that shows the same thing, but with the building blown up. So the artwork is just bananas in this game. And then you also have Battle of Britain that's coming out in 2023,
yes,
which is another like standalone game in the series. And that's going to be focused on more aerial combat, the dog fighting and everything of World War II. So it's just, I really adore how well done this game is, how kind of easy it is to get into, especially if you start with Normandy. But there's just so much tension. Like, I feel like I'm sweating every hand of cards. Like, what is my opponent going to do? What am I going to do? And then the artwork is just amazing by Roland McDonald. Like every soldier card has like, they have the same style, but they have so much personality to the way he illustrated them. But anyway, that's my number 2. It's the entire Undaunted series from Osprey Games and David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. Have you played Undaunted games before?
I'm going to lose all your respect here. I have not played any of them.
Oh, you're not losing my respect. Now I'm giving you opportunities.
There was a convention where the Osprey guys were kind enough to come to the Dice Tower booth, and they gave us a bunch of their games. I think they didn't want to take them back from the convention, but they were kind enough to give us a bunch of their games. So I have them, and I haven't played them yet.
I think
but now I'm exciting. I should.
Yeah,
and I should say Osprey has been knocking it out of the park. Their quality of their publications, the components, the art, even the boxes have just been amazing over the past, I'm going to say 5 years. They've been so
they're
good.
crushing it. They're crushing it. But
Absolutely.
you should totally check this out. And like, even people who are like, oh, I don't want to play a war game, maybe, I say give it a try. If you like deck building and like unique deck building games, like this is just, it's so well done. It's very accessible, and the gameplay is just so tense and fun. So I'm giving you homework, Corey. Make sure you play some Undaunted game before the next time I talk to you.
It's in the list. I'm excited.
What's your number 1?
All right. Again, no particular order, but this is the last one.
Okay.
So my number 1 is XenoShyft Onslaught.
Oh, another Xeno game.
Pairs up with XenoShyft Dreadmire. These are by Karen Philosophiles and Michael Schnell, and it was published by Edge Entertainment and Cool Mini or Not. This was a Cool Mini, one of their big, huge Kickstarters they were doing in their heyday of big, huge Kickstarters. So XenoShyft is a cooperative, all-out war of cards. And it's got that feeling that I think Aliens also has. Players they each create their own line of cards. I believe there's 5 in the line. And then they have to fight a line of aliens, which come off of a deck of bad guy aliens. And the first guy in your line has to fight the first alien in their line. And whoever wins stays, and whoever loses is removed from the line, and the line shifts up, and then it's another battle.
Cool.
So it's this tense deck builder where you have an open market. You can kind of buy any sort of troops or abilities or items that you want, grenades or paratroopers that'll jump in and insert anywhere in the line, or big tanks that'll sit in the back, or medics that'll heal up the line. But you basically are just slamming 2 lines against each other head to head.
Wow.
The good guys and the bad guys. If all of your good guys in the line are wiped out, the remaining aliens then put damage onto your home base. And if the base runs out of hit points, you lose. So the tension, the art, the variety of different cards are really pretty amazing. There were little add-ons, because Cool Mini always does a bunch of little add-ons. There were genetic alterations, so you can have this paratrooper that jumps in, but genetically he's got like a psionic blast and blows away an alien. So it's just a really cool, fun game. A little hard to find nowadays because it just had the one Kickstarter, but that's it. It's XenoShyft, and there were two big boxes: XenoShyft Onslaught and XenoShyft Dreadmire, both standalone games, and then a bunch of little expansions by Cool Mini or Not. That's my number one.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never played that. I have heard of it. And I love that you have two games on your list that are Xena, like that start with Xeno or something.
Yeah, you haven't. Next time on podcast, we'll have top 5 games that begin with X.
Yeah. I'm kind of disappointed because, you tell me I can't get this game and you made it sound so cool. So.
Oh, it's really cool.
Way to hurt my feelings there, Corey. But you have it, right?
I have which?
Do you have the XenoShyft?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'll come over and play it sometime.
Perfect. Anytime you want, I'll
Cool.
take it out.
Awesome. All right. So my number one is
I can't wait. Okay.
Arctic Scavengers.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Arctic Scavengers was originally released in 2009 from Rio Grande Games, and it's designed by Robert K. Gabhart. I actually have the 2015 edition, the one that has the base game plus the HQ and Recon expansions. But in Arctic Scavengers, and I believe it is a 2 to 5 player game, maybe 2 to 4, I don't recall offhand, but we're basically leaders of a small tribe of survivors with a limited supply of resources, tools, medicine, and mercenaries. And we're basically trying to fight against other tribes to survive. And it's winter. It's winter. That's why it's called Arctic Scavengers. And basically you're building up your deck of cards, which is you're trying to build up your tribe. And there's a phase where you're kind of gathering resources, but then there's also a skirmish phase, this is one of the main reasons I love this game, is there's a skirmish phase where you are then kind of pitted against all the other players to have a brawl. Is it a brawl phase or a skirmish phase? I don't know. But the trick is when you take your turn, you have to, if you have a hand of 5 cards, you have to purposefully hold back a couple cards for the brawl should you want to compete for it. And what you're competing for is a kind of a powerful card that you'll get to add to your deck. And at the beginning of each round, only the start player gets to peek and see what that reward card is that you're going to be able to add. So they have some data to see hey, do I want to go heavy to fight for this brawl, or do I not care? And then with this brawl phase or this skirmish phase, there's a whole bluffing element to it because I could be the first player and I'm the one that saw what the reward is. And I could say, oh, I'm going to only play 2 cards for my actions. And then I'm committing 3 cards to the brawl. And you you announce that at the end of your turn. So other people might be like, oh, well, she's going really heavy. I just can't even compete for that. Maybe I won't do anything. Or maybe it makes them go harder and you really only put in some junky cards because you don't care, but you're making them burn cards and kind of waste what they could be doing on their action turn. So having this brawl phase is just so awesome. And then it's very thematic. This is pure deck builder here. We're playing cards. It's very thematic in that there's an action where you can dig through junk. And that's where you'll get to, depending on the strength of your action, draw cards from this junk pile. And you might find medicine, or you might find a weapon or a tool or something like that. Or you might get junked, but you don't show anybody. Then you can take one of the cards if you want, or you could just put all the junk back in, I think, to the bottom of the deck. But yeah, there's something I love about this game. We always put on the Revenant soundtrack when we play it. I just love kind of winter themed survival games. And there's just something that, again, I think it's a lot of the brawl phase and the fact that thematically you're not going for victory points, but you're trying to build up your tribes. And some of the cards that have, more people in the tribes, more tribe points, you could call them, are those cards that don't do anything else. So it's well, what's the timing of having this card that's kind of a dead card? It's going to help with my score at the end of the game, but, balancing how many of those cards you put in. Yeah, I don't know. I find it very exciting. It's just, I just really love it. Have you played Arctic Scavengers?
I have. I picked it up at a flea market and thought it was really cool. The other interesting thing, it was on my short list.
Oh,
cool. It's one of the first games I remember that had this split phase where you play out your cards, but you have to hold back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's turned into a big mechanic recently with things like Endless Winter, Paleomeric, and even Dune Imperium.
Yeah, you
split
save them.
Phase.
Yep.
You play these, but save those.
Yep.
Just in case.
Yeah, it's so cool.
That was, it's an awesome game. That's really fun.
Yeah, I just, anytime I'm going through and trying to like cull down my collection, I'm like, nope, Arctic Scavenger stays. I just don't cull my collection. I wish. We just don't have the space. And I'll never get to all the games, so I'll just have to fly up or drive up to you to play games in your library then.
There you go. See, that's the secret. You just need to buy another house just to hold all the games.
Awesome. Well, Corey, it was so great talking to you, and I love deck building games. And you're such a sweetheart and an awesome person to talk with and play games with. So I'm, this has just been a blast talking to you and hearing your list. And now I have to go find some new games to buy. Thank you, Corey.
Not a problem. I'm here for you anytime. You just call me up and I'll go, hey, have you played this obscure game you cannot get? It's really good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me on. This has been so much fun. This is a blast.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at BoardGameGeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@BoardGameGeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!